Hi guys, good evening everyone. In the last session, we understood what is load balancer and how to implement load balancer in our Spring Boot microservices. Here we are running our application in one instance. When we run our application in one instance, the burden will be increased on the server to handle that load. To avoid that problem, I'm running my application in the multiple instances. When I run my application in the multiple instances, the load will be distributed to multiple servers so that burden will be reduced on the server. What we have done is in the last session, we have implemented load balancing for the Greet API. Instead of running the Greet API in one service, in one instance, we are running the Greet API in multiple instances. That means I'm running the same project with multiple servers. So here, Spring Boot application will have by default Tomcat as an embedded server. When we run our boot application, server will start. Here, as I'm running the same application multiple times, multiple servers will start. So every server should have a different port number. That's why I'm passing the port number dynamically at the time of running the application. And we have seen that inter-service communication is happening. Welcome API is communicating with the Greet API. Welcome API communicating with the Greet API by using FIAN client. Here we are using FIAN client for inter-service communication. What is inter-service communication? One API will communicate with another API through service registry. That is called inter-service communication. I'm sending the request for the welcome API. Welcome API will call the FIAN client. FIAN client will call the Greet API. But for the FIAN client, I'm not giving the service URL. I'm giving the service name. When we provide the service name for the FIAN client will talk to service registry. With the service name, it will get the service URL. Then it is going to communicate with the Greet API. When the FIAN client communicating with the service registry for the Greet API URL, FIAN client will provide 3 URLs because we have executed in the 3 instances. When FIAN client getting 3 URLs for the Greet API, FIAN client will communicate with the ribbon. Ribbon is used to distribute the load to all the servers based on the availability. As 3 instances available for the Greet API, the request will go to all the 3 instances in the round robin fashion. Practically, we have seen that. When I delete one instance, the remaining instances are able to handle the request which is coming to our application. So with this, we completed what is inter-service communication and what is load balancing in our microservices. And today, our main focus is on API gateway. So what is API gateway in the microservices? What is the role of the API gateway in the microservices? Here, guys, in the backend, multiple services will be available. We don't provide the access for our backend APIs directly for the end users. If end users want to access any backend API, then API gateway will come into picture. If anybody want to access our backend API, directly they cannot access our backend API. For all the backend APIs, one entry gate will be available. That entry gate is called API gateway in our microservices. API gateway is used to manage all the backend APIs of our application. In the backend, I have taken 2 APIs. It can be 5 APIs, it can be 10 APIs, it can be 30 APIs, right? So that kind of project will be available in the real time. In the backend, multiple APIs will be available. In order to manage all the APIs in the backend, we are going to take API gateway. If you observe, this API gateway is used to manage the APIs in the backend, and this API gateway will act as a mediator between end users and our backend APIs. So now whenever user send a request, directly that request should not go to our backend API. So as of now, as of yesterday, what we have done is we have started our microservices and we are sending the request for the microservices and we are directly accessing them. But in the real time, it will not happen. So whenever user send a request, that request will go to API gateway. API gateway will execute some filters and it will execute some routing. So what is the filter in the API gateway? So filter is used to perform pre-processing. Whenever request comes, do we need to process that request or not? Is it a valid request or not? That kind of checks can be implemented in the filter. Once the filter execution is completed, If a filter is able to identify it is a valid request, then routing will come into picture. What is routing? Routing is used to identify which request should go to which API in the backend. If I send a request for /greet, that request should go to greet API. If I send a request to the welcome, that request should go to welcome API. That is called routing. Now, when I implement API gateway, I will send the request to the API gateway. API gateway will execute the filter and it will execute the routing. So what is API gateway? API gateway will act as a mediator between client requests and backend APIs. API gateway will provide single entry point to access our backend APIs. So users cannot access our backend APIs directly. User will send the request. That request will be received by API gateway. API gateway mainly contains two things. One is called filters and the second one is called routings. What is the purpose of filters? Filters are used to execute some logic before request processing, after request processing. By using this filter, we can perform some pre-processing and we can perform some post-processing also. Pre-processing and post-processing can be done by using filters. Got it? Then routing. What is the purpose of routing? Routing is used to tell which request should go to which REST API. Suppose I'm sending a request to the API gateway /greet. API gateway will execute the filter and the API gateway should forward my request to the greet API. If I send a request for the welcome, that request should go to welcome API through API gateway. API gateway is entry point for the backend APIs. API gateway is the mediator between incoming requests and the backend APIs. In the API gateway, mainly filters will be available and routing will be available. Filters are used to execute some logic before the request processing and after the request processing. Routing is used to tell which request should go to which REST API. In Spring Cloud, we have two options to create the API gateway, guys. Earlier, people created with a Joule proxy. Earlier, people used to work with a Joule proxy to implement API gateway. But in the recent versions of the Spring Boot, they are not supporting for the Joule proxy. As an alternate for the Joule proxy, they have provided Spring Cloud Gateway. So earlier, we used it to work with the Joule proxy as API gateway, but in the latest version of the Spring Boot, they are not supporting for the Joule proxy. People are going for Spring Cloud Gateway. Joule proxy not supported by latest versions of the Spring Boot. Are you guys able to understand what is API gateway in the microservices? Are you guys able to understand what is API gateway in the microservices? Could you please respond? What is API gateway in the microservices, guys? What is API gateway in the microservices? API gateway will act as mediator between the client requests and backend APIs. API gateway will provide single entry point to access our backend APIs. In API gateway, we will write mainly two types of logics. One is the filter logic, second one is routing logic. Filters are used to execute some logic before request processing and after request processing. Routing is used to tell which request should go to which REST API. In the cloud, we have two options to create API gateway. One is the Joule proxy, another one is the cloud gateway. Now let me show you how to create this. Guys, in the welcome API also, I want to implement load balancing. I want to implement load balancing in the welcome API also. Can we get the port number? In which port number the request getting processed? Do you know how to get the port number of our application? Yesterday we implemented in the greet API. Today I want to implement that in the welcome API also. I need to inject environment object, private environment object. Go for auto wiring. By using that environment object, we can get in which port number it is running. At the rate auto-wide annotation I'm using. It is used to inject this object. Environment, you need to choose Spring Framework core environment, not Corba. We need to go for Spring Framework core environment object. Using this environment object, I can get the port number env.get property of server.port. What is the port number of our server? I want to get that. Okay. What port number I want to append? I want to append that port number in the response of welcome message. Okay, guys. I'm going to append port number. Greet API will give in which port on which port number that on which server the request got processed. Welcome API will give on which port number that request got processed. So that we will understand both Greet API and Welcome API load balancing concept here. Greet API response will come, Welcome API response will come. And I'm having inter-service communication also. Whenever we send a request for the Welcome API will communicate with the Greet API. Okay, Greet API will give the response. Welcome API will combine Greet API response plus Welcome API response. Perfect. Now, once we are getting the port number, we should not hard code the port number. I want to run in the multiple instances. I will give multiple port numbers 8081, 8082, 8083. 8 series for the Welcome API, 9 series for the Greet API. Okay, guys, fine. Along with this, now I want to create API gateway. For API gateway, I will give the port number as 3333. Now, API gateway will contain a filter and API gateway will contain a routing. So what are the steps we need to follow to create the API gateway? So to create this API gateway, what are the steps we need to follow? And what is the configuration we need to do? Create one boot application with web starter, Eureka, cloud gateway. That is the most important. We are going to develop API gateway by using cloud gateway concept. So we need to select a cloud gateway as a dependency. And remember, API gateway also will register with the service registry. Why API gateway will register with the service registry? For routing purpose. So which request should go to which service? That service name we will configure in the routing. Based on the service name, it will get the service URL. API gateway also will act as a client for the service registry. API gateway will be registering with the service registry. Okay, so create the boot application with web starter, with the Eureka client, with the cloud gateway, and with the dev tools. Got it? Now let me go and create this project. I'm creating my 35 application, file, new, Spring starter project. Let me make it as 35. Spring Boot Microservice API gateway, cloud gateway basically, API gateway. It is responsible to handle all the incoming requests. Take the request and execute the filter and give it to router. Click on next. I'm creating API gateway project. Select a Eureka client and web dependency, dev tools. Then we need to go for cloud gateway. Let us type cloud gateway. What is the dependency here? Gateway dependency. Yes, Spring Cloud Routing gateway dependency is available. So what is this gateway dependency providing? It provides a simple, effective way to route to APIs and provide cross-cutting concerns to them such as security, monitoring, metrics, and resiliency. So whatever the common logics that you want to write for all the APIs, for example, monitoring or resiliency or security. Instead of implementing these common logics in all the backend APIs, we can implement them at one place. That's where API gateway comes into picture. Click on this gateway. Next, finish. With this, I'm creating my API gateway project. And let us see what are the dependencies that we are configuring in the API gateway. What are the dependencies we have configured in our API gateway? Observe carefully. So in the API gateway, if you observe, Webflux starter is coming and cloud starter gateway is available. Eureka client is available and dev tools also available. So this is the most important dependency, that is cloud starter gateway. With the cloud starter gateway, we are creating our API gateway. Fine. So with this, our project got created. Once it is created, we need to represent our application as a Eureka client. My API gateway also should register with the service registry. For that, we are using one annotation called enable discovery client annotation. So keep that annotation at API gateway project start class. Go to this start class application.java. In this, I'm keeping one annotation at the discovery client. What is the meaning of that? This application will act as a client for the Eureka server. Okay. So with this, my project is created and I represented this project as a Eureka client. Then the most important thing is configure API gateway routings in the YML file. So I told you routings are required. What is the meaning of routing? Guys, can you tell me what is the meaning of routing? Can anyone tell me what is the meaning of routing? Navigating the request from one application to another application. Here in the routing means. So here we will send the end user will send the request to the backend APIs, or end user will send the request to the API gateway. End user will send the request to the backend API, or end user will send the request to API gateway. End user will send the request to API gateway. Then what API gateway should do? API gateway should forward the request to backend API. Backend API will have one instance. Backend API will have multiple instances. Backend API will have one instance. Backend API will have multiple instances. Backend API will have one instance, or backend API will have multiple instances. Multiple instances. Who will maintain all the URLs of the instances? Who will maintain all the URLs of the instances? Come on, guys. Service registry. So now API gateway should communicate with the service registry. API gateway no need to communicate with the service registry. API gateway should communicate with the service registry. API gateway no need to communicate with the service registry. API gateway has to communicate with the service registry. Okay. So that's where the routings comes into picture. What are the routings we need to configure here? The routings configuration. Let me take this configuration. Go to our API gateway. Convert the properties file to YML file. Converting the properties file to YML file. Guys, these are the routings that we are configuring in the API gateway. See here, first of all, for API gateway, I'm setting the port number. I want to run API gateway project in the port number, on the port number 3333. I want to run API gateway project on the port number 3333. Are you clear with my point? Then I want to set the name as Cloud API Gateway, spring.application.name and server port number 3333. Here if you see, the actual routers are available. Routes available. In the routes I am giving ID. ID can be anything. I will give ID as A and I will give ID as B. That means these are two IDs available. Nothing but two backend APIs are available. I'm telling that URI, here LB represents load balancer. Whenever a request comes with /welcome, then you go to welcome API load balancer. Welcome API can have multiple instances. You forward the request to the welcome API load balancer so that request will be handled by multiple instances in the round robin fashion. Similarly, whenever request comes to /greet, you forward the request to greet API load balancer. Greet API can have multiple instances. So here I'm giving the URI as load balancer of service name, welcome-API, greet-API. I'm giving that. Okay, guys. So what is this URI LB? LB colon service name, LB colon service name. I'm telling to my API gateway, whenever request comes with /welcome, then you forward the request to welcome API load balancer. Welcome API load balancer may have one URL, may have two URLs. So this is name of the service. With this service name, service registry will maintain the URLs. You get the URL of the service and you forward the request to that particular service. That is the meaning of routings configuration. So gateway discovery locator enabled true. That means it should be locating all the backend APIs. Lowercase service ID true. Service ID can be available in the lowercase format. These are normal properties only. Here, actual routers are available. Routes, one routing, and this is another routing. So there are two backend APIs available in my project. If I have 4 backend APIs, 4 routes I am going to configure. How API gateway will understand the routing? Here in the predicate, I have given the path. If path is /welcome in the request, then it should be go to welcome API. If a path is /greet, it should go to greet API. LB:/service name. That means in the service registry, for that service, multiple URLs can be available. It has to route the request based on round robin fashion. Here I'm giving the name of the application and here I'm giving the port number of the server. Are you able to understand API gateway routings now? Are you guys able to understand API gateway routings now? These routings are daily configurations or it is one-time configuration in the project. These routings are daily configurations or one-time configurations in the project. These routings are daily configurations or one-time configurations, guys. Come on. These routings are one-time configurations. Are you clear? Are you able to understand the routing configuration? Are you able to understand the routing's configuration? What is the meaning of routing? Whenever request comes with greet URL, go to greet API. Whenever routing comes with a welcome URL, go to welcome API. Why I am giving LB: here? What is the reason for the LB:? Load balancer, service name. For that service name, multiple service URLs can be available. Perfect, guys. Now, with this, we understood how to configure routings. Then what about filter? What is the meaning of a filter, guys? What is the meaning of a filter? What is the purpose of filter? If you want to implement any security. So if I want to secure my backend APIs, in the welcome API, I should write the security logic. In the greet API, I should write the security logic. Instead of writing that security logic in both APIs, can I write that security logic at the API gateway to verify that the request is valid or not? Can I verify that logic in the, can I write that logic to verify the request in the API gateway? Is it recommended to write that logic in the API gateway or recommended to write that logic in all the APIs in the project? Recommended to write the logic in the API gateway or recommended to write the logic in all the APIs? Only at the API gateway. So in order to execute that logic, we are going to create a filter. We are going to create a filter. Filters are used to perform pre-processing. How to create a filter in the API gateway? To create a filter in the API gateway, we are going to implement a concept called global filter. We are going to implement a concept called global filter. Let me create one filter class in the API gateway. So now I'm going to create one class called myFilter. myFilter. This filter class is going to implement one interface called global filter. Implements one interface called global filter. When it is implementing a global filter, we need to override one interface called filter method. Filter interface is having a filter method. Here, server web exchange filter chain is available. By using this exchange method, we can access the request. Whatever the request is coming for our application, we can access that request by using exchange. Servlet request or servlet HTTP request will be available. Import that package. Servlet server HTTP request. Okay. So we are importing that package. Whatever global filter I'm creating. Now see here. I want to create one filter. To represent this class as a filter class, I need to extend the properties from, I need to implement one interface called global filter. In the global filter, we are having a filter method. We need to override that. Now, once my logic is completed, then I will do chain.filter. Whatever the filter I am calling, I'm going to do chain.filter. Next filter will be executed or else it will forward the request to actual service. Now here, whenever a request comes, my filter will be executed. Whenever a request comes, my filter will be executed. So in this filter, I want to access the request which is coming from the application, which is coming to the application, and exchange dot get a request. Servlet request will come. That request information I'm accessing. Now request dot get headers. What are the headers coming in the request? I want to access the headers. Now headers dot get header key. Headers dot get header key. Based on the key, and we can get the value. So I want to access all the headers which are coming. I want to get all the headers which are coming. For that, we can go for request dot get headers. I got the HTTP headers. Now headers dot get. I want to get all the keys and values. So to get all the keys and values, here we have key set method. So once you go for headers dot key set, what are the keys we are getting? We will get all the keys in the set format. Once I got the key, then I will get the value for that key. Key set is available. Now let me get a value. Headers dot get of key. Whatever the key is available, I'm passing that key and I'm going to get the list of values available for that key. Once I got the list of values of that key, I can print that list. I can print that list. So here system.out.println key comma values I am printing. Key comma values I am printing. So what are the keys are there in the header? For that key, what are the values available? I'm getting. Now guys, once I get the header, can I verify header contains some security token or not? If my client is sending security token in the header, then only I will process the request. Otherwise, I will not process that request. That security logic can be implemented. For every client, I will tell in the header, you need to send one token. If a token is present in the header, then only I will process the request. Otherwise, I will not process that request. Are you guys able to follow me? Now this class I want to represent as a string bean. For that, I'm going for @ component. What is the meaning of @ component? @ component is used to represent our Java class as a string bean. So what I have done here, I have created one Java class with a name called myFilter. It is implementing an interface called global filter. In the global filter, I'm overriding filter method. So when I'm overriding the filter method, I'm getting exchange object. With that exchange, I'm getting my request. Whatever the request is coming to my application, that complete request information I can access in my filter method. In this request, what is the data coming? What is the request body data? What are the request headers are available? I can access. If you want to get the body, you can get the body also. Request body also, if you want to see what data coming from the client, you can get that as by using request.get body. I don't want to get the body now, only headers are sufficient. So what are the headers coming? I'm able to get the headers. I'm printing the headers. Here guys, can I check logic token present or not in header? Check for token in the header. Check for token in header. Can I check it? Can I check the token is available or not? Come on guys. I can check for the token present. If token present, then only process the request. Otherwise, don't process the request. That logic can be implemented in the filter. Are you clear with the filter creation and router creation in the API gateway? Router configuration and filter creation in the API gateway. Now look at the API gateway. What is API gateway in our microservices? API gateway is used to manage all the backend APIs available in our application. API gateway is used to manage all the backend APIs that are available in our application. API gateway contains filters and routing. Filters are used to perform pre-processing and post-processing logics. Routers are used to forward the request to particular backend API. Now, so here I will run my application. Good guys, so let's get started. First, I will start with my service registry. That is my Eureka server. Refresh this project. So total 5 projects I have created. One is a service registry. Second one is admin server. Third one is greet API. Fourth one is welcome API. Fifth one is API gateway. service registry. Let me run this project. Run as boot application. That is used to register all the services that are available in our application. Go to console, clear this. Now, with this, my service registry started. Go to browser. Let us access this, guys. Localhost colon 8761. Localhost colon 8761. We are able to access our service registry. Currently, any service registered with the service registry? Any service registered with the service registry? Come on, guys. Any service registered with the service registry? Not registered. Just my Eureka server started. Then go here. Let me start my admin server. Run as boot application. I'm running admin server. Admin server is used to monitor and manage all our backend APIs. Admin server is used to monitor and manage all our backend APIs. Okay. Let's go here and access admin server. Admin server running on which port number? Admin server running on the port number 1111. Go to browser. Let us access that. Localhost colon 1111. Localhost colon 1111. So with this, my admin server got started. With this, my admin server got started. Currently, any application registered with the admin server? Not started, not registered. Eureka is running. Admin server is also running. Now let me register my applications with the service registry. Greet API, I will start first. Then I will go for welcome API. Are we going to run our application in one server, or we need to run our application in multiple servers? Are we going to run our application in one server? We need to run our application in multiple servers. To see the load balancing, we need to go for multiple servers. Greet API, I will start with 9 series. Greet API, I will start with 9 series. Refresh this Greet API. Now, in the Greet API, are we configuring the port number, or we will pass the port number in the runtime? Am I configuring the port number for the Greet API? I will pass in the runtime. I will pass in the runtime. Do you know how to start the project with the port number by giving in the runtime? Run configurations. Okay. Right click on the Greet API. Run as run configurations. Go to here. Select, guys. This is very important. Select the Greet API. Go to arguments 9091. First instance, I'm starting with port number 9091. So select your app, right click, run as run configuration. After run configuration, select your API, go to arguments, -d, server.port is equal to 9091. Click on apply, click on run. With this, my Greet API first instance is running. With this, my Greet API first instance is running. 9091 is the port number. Go to Eureka. Refresh. Yes. Can you see? Greet API first instance started. Can you see Greet API first instance started? Yes. For the Greet API, first instance started. Okay, guys. Perfect. Someone is asking, can we give multiple port numbers in the VM arguments? It will run only one application now, one time. Na? If you give multiple port numbers, what is the use? No use. If you want to run in a separate server, you need to start it, right? So no need, you can't give like that. Now, let me run it in another instance. Right click on the Greet API, run as, run configuration, select the Greet API, arguments 9092. Click on apply, click on run. Click on apply, click on run. Yes, go to Eureka. Yes. Can you see 2 instances available for Greet API? Can you see 2 instances available for Greet API? With this, load balancing will happen or not? Load balancing will happen. Like that, you can start multiple instances also. Okay, I'm good with 2 instances now. Next, I want to go for welcome API. In the welcome API, am I configuring the port number, or I will run multiple instances for the welcome API? In the welcome API also, port number is not available. Can I run 2 instances for welcome API as well? Yesterday we started welcome API only in 1 instance. Now I want to start the welcome API in the 2 instances. For the welcome API, I want to give 80 series port number, 8081, 8082. For greet API, I have given 9091, 9092. Greet API is having 9091 and 9092. Okay guys, good. Now go here. Right click on the welcome API, run as, run configuration. Select welcome API here. Select welcome API here. Arguments. Let us pass. -d server.port is equal to 8081. For the first instance of the welcome API, I'm giving the port number as 8081. Click on apply, click on run. First instance of the welcome API starting with the 8081 port number. Go and check in the service registry. Yes. Can you see welcome API registered in the service registry with 8081? Yes or no? Welcome API registered in the service registry with the port number 8081. I want to run one more instance for the welcome API. Run as, run configuration, select the welcome API, arguments 8082. Click on apply, click on run. I'm running one more instance for welcome API. Both instances will be registered with the service registry. Both instances will be registered with the service registry. Go to our browser and check this. Yes. Can you see now? Greet API having 2 instances with 9091 port number server, 9092 port number server. Welcome API running in 2 instances with 8081 port number server with 8082 port number server. Are you clear what I have done as of now? I have started my service registry. I have started my admin server. Now go to here, admin server, 2 applications. But how many instances? Each application having 2 instances. Greet API having 2 instances. Welcome API having 2 instances. Are they registered with my admin server or not? Are they registered with my admin server or not? Yes, they registered with my admin server. 2 applications I have started, each application having 2 instances. Now tell me, what is the meaning of instance? What is application and what is instance? Application means one REST API. Instance means it is running in one server. One API running in 2 servers, nothing but one application, 2 instances. 2 applications are there, each application running in 2 servers. That means for every application, 2 copies are available. Instance means 1 copy. Instance means 1 copy. 2 applications are having 4 instances. Are you clear with the service registry, admin server, and my backend APIs? Are you clear? Are you clear with this? Now, what is the last step now? What is the last step now? We need to start our API gateway. So our today's main focus is on API gateway. So what is API gateway? What is API gateway? It is the mediator between end user requests and backend APIs. What logics are what port number I have configured for API gateway and what logics are available in the API gateway? Yesterday, API gateway was not available, but today I have taken API gateway. I'm registering API gateway as a Eureka client because for routing purpose, API gateway should get the URL from the service registry. Okay. Now in the API gateway, I am having routings. Which request should go to which API I configured in the API gateway. And I created one filter also to perform some pre-processing. Currently in the filter, I am writing the logic to print the headers coming in the request. Okay, fine. API gateway will run on the port number 3333. Let us start. Before that, you check in the Eureka. API gateway available in the Eureka. API gateway not available in the Eureka. API gateway available in the Eureka. API gateway not available in the Eureka. Not available in the Eureka. Okay, now go here and let me start my API gateway. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. Perfect. API gateway is getting started. It is having routings. It is having filter. It is having routing. It is having filter. Go to our service registry. Refresh. Okay. API gateway. API gateway. It is coming as unknown. API gateway coming as unknown. Did I give the application name? Yes, I have given the application name, but it is coming as unknown. API gateway. Let me check it. Why it is coming as unknown? Is it loading my properties file or it is not loading my properties file? It is starting as 8080. My properties file is loaded. My properties file is not loaded. Not loaded. So what I need to do? Let me stop the API gateway. Let me update the project and run it. Maven, update the project. I forgot to update it. Update the project. So when I have done this, now see, it will unregister with the service registry. Currently in the service registry, Greet API is available. Welcome API is available. Now refresh this project. I have done Maven update, guys, for the API gateway. Maven update the project. Force update the project. Perfect. Maven project got updated. Then refresh because this YML file should be loaded properly. Refresh. Then run this. Run as boot application. Now it should load our YML properties. I have configured port number. I have configured routings. I have configured application name also. Now it is loading properly. Now go to our Eureka, refresh. Now can you see my cloud API gateway registered? Now can I see my cloud API gateway registered? Yes. How many instances available for cloud API gateway? How many instances available for cloud API gateway? One instance is available for cloud API gateway. Now I want to access Greet API. I will send the request to Greet API or I will send the request to API gateway. User request will be sent to the API gateway or user request will go to the backend API directly. I will send the request to API gateway. If I send the request to API gateway, then what API gateway should do now? If I send the request to API gateway, what my API gateway should do now? Come on, guys. I will send the request to API gateway. Then what API gateway should do now? API gateway should route the request based on the path I have configured. Can we test routing is working or not? Can we test our routing is working or not? Yes. Let me go to browser, open a tab, localhost : what is that? Port number of API gateway 3333/greet. I'm sending the request to 3333 port number, but response I got from which server? Greet API server. So Greet API actually running on which port number? 9091, 9092. Which server running on the 3333 port number? My API gateway. So when I send the request to localhost : 3333/greet, which server is sending the response? Greet API server. So load balancing is happening with the Greet API or not? API gateway routing my request to the Greet API or not? API gateway routing my request to the Greet API server or not? Yes. Yes. Similarly, can we test welcome? Can we test welcome? Now go here and test with welcome /welcome. When I send the request to the welcome, Greet API second server responded. Welcome API first server responded. Refresh, and Greet API second server responded. Welcome API second server responded. Now when I send Greet API first server responded. Welcome API first server responded. Refresh. Now Greet API first server. Welcome API second server. Refresh. Greet API second server. Welcome API first server. Refresh. Both servers second servers executed. Now this is first server. This is also first server. Routing is happening. Inter-service communication is also happening. I'm sending request to whom? 3333. Which is server running on the 3333? API gateway /welcome. In the API gateway, what we have configured? In the API gateway, if it is coming with the /welcome, go to welcome API. How many servers available for the welcome API? My welcome API having 2 servers. My welcome API having 2 servers. 8081, 8082. If I send the request to 3333 greet, it is going to greet API. How many servers available for greet API? 2 servers available. Both are responding. I'm sending the request to API gateway. API gateway routing the request to the greet server. Here I'm sending the request to the API gateway with welcome. API gateway routing to welcome API. Welcome API communicating with the greet API by using PN client. API gateway available. Service registry available. Inter-service communication with the PN client is available. Admin server is also available. Admin server is also available. Now can I say this architecture is working now? API gateway. I'm sending the request to the API gateway. API gateway executing filter and routing. Let us see filter is executed or not. Definitely filter also will execute. Clear the console and send the request to the API gateway once again. /welcome, send the request. When I send the request, check the console. In the console, can you see my headers are printing? Can you see my headers are printing? So localhost to host, I send the request for this host. This is the header, connection, cache control, okay, accept language. All this information is sending. These are called HTTP headers. Same request if I send from the postman, postman header will be printed. So whenever we send a request from the postman, postman token will be generated. Postman token will be sent in the request as a request header. Now check it. Open the postman tool and send a request from the postman. In the interview, recently, they asked me this question. For your REST API, how you will understand request is coming from other application or request is coming from the postman? I will show you that now. Localhost :3333 /welcome. Okay, let me clear my console. Clear the console. I'm sending a GET request from postman. Send request. I got the response 200. Okay, go to console. Can you see postman token printed? That means when you are sending a request to your REST API from the postman, postman will send one token in the header. My filter is executed. My filter is printing the headers coming in the request. Suppose if I send the same request from the browser, postman token will not go. If you send the request from the postman, then only postman token will go. Postman token will represent that this request is coming from the postman tool. Clear the console. Let me send the request from the browser /welcome. I send the request from the browser. Check the console. Here, postman token is printing. Postman token is not printing. Postman token is printing or not printing. That means request did not come from the postman. So here postman token is not printing. This request came from the browser. Okay. Now clear the console. Send from the postman. Same request. Now check the console. Postman token coming or not? So can we identify the request is coming from postman or not? By using filter, by using request header, can we catch that? Yes. Now, am I able to access all the request information by using this filter or not? In this, if the request does not contain a particular header, then I will stop the request processing. I will send error response to the client. I will send some error response to the client if the filter does not satisfy our logic. You understand what is API gateway, what is a filter, and what is routing? What is filter and what is routing? Are you able to understand? Are you able to understand? Come on. Filter is used to execute some logic before processing the request. You can implement your security by using filter. Whether the request should be processed or not can be decided by the filter. So I will tell to my client, when you are sending a request, you send me your username in the request. I will tell to my clients, whenever you are accessing my application, my microservice application, your request will come to API gateway. API gateway will check for the header. You send one header. You send one header. If a header is present, then only I will process. If a header is not present, I will not process your request. Like this, we can decide that. Got it? How to decide FIAN client should be written in the welcome API, not in the greet API. It depends upon the requirement, man. Which API want to access which API, based on that you will write your FIAN client. You can, if you write FIAN client in the greet API will access welcome API. If I write FIAN client in the welcome API, it will access the greet API. So you will get the requirement, right? Which API should access which API? They will give in the requirement. So API 1 should access API 2. When API 1 want to access API 2, API 1 should have a FIAN client. They will tell you that. Where you need to implement service communication. That is your business logic, na? Which API should communicate with which API. Fine. Filter. Filter is used to perform pre-processing. Security logic can be implemented in the filter. Whether request should be processed or not can be decided by the filter. Whether do we need to process the request or not, we can decide at the filter. Instead of writing the security logic in all the backend APIs, we can write the security logic at one place, which will applicable for all the APIs. That is called filter in the API gateway. Filter will be available, routing will be available. Filter we can use for multiple purposes. I want to store each request information. I want to print log for each request. I want to check request is valid or not. That can be implemented by using filter. Routing. Routing is used to decide which request should go to which API in the backend. That can be implemented by using routing. Clear? Yeah. Anybody having questions? You can unmute and you can ask me now.
Sir, without the service registry, can we directly API gateway access the backend APIs?
API gateway will not access the backend APIs because API gateway having the URL or API gateway having the service name in the routing.
Yes, sir. Service name is routing is there. If this routing is not there, then directly we can access.
Yes, if routing is not there, directly you can access it, no problem. If you have API gateway, then definitely you need to configure the routing, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Suppose you don't want to give the service name, then you can directly give the URL. Giving the URL is recommended, giving the service name is recommended.
Service name is recommended.
Why? Because URL may change in the future. Number of instances will increase, number of instances will decrease. That's why always in the routing we will configure service name. So when service name is configured, who will maintain the URLs of this service name? Service registry. So when request comes, request is going to the backend API directly, request is coming to API gateway. Guys, request is going to
API gateway.
API gateway. Then what API gateway is doing here?
It filters and routes the.
It is filtering, it will filter the request and it will route the request. What is the meaning of filtering? Verifying whether this request should be processed or not. Routing means which request should go to which API based on the service name. So here API gateway will communicate with the service registry, or API gateway will not communicate with the service registry.
It will communicate with the service registry.
Why it will communicate with the service registry?
To find the service
To
URL.
find the service
To find
URLs.
the service URLs based on the service. Good. Now you got what is microservice?
Yes.
What is microservices architecture?
Yes, we got it.
What is the role of service registry in the microservices?
Yes,
It
sir.
registers all the services.
It is
Whatever
used
the
to maintain list
backend
of all the
services.
services, backend services available. What are the names of the services? What is the status of the service? What is the URL of the service? That
Yeah,
will be
even-
maintained by service registry.
Instances.
Yeah.
What is
Number.
admin server?
Number of instances.
It is
Number
used
of
to monitor and
instances.
manage the backend
Yes.
services.
Admin server is used to monitor and manage all the backend APIs, activator endpoints. Now, do I need to hit each endpoint URL to monitor the actuator endpoints, or I can
No,
access
not
from admin
required.
server?
You can use the admin server
Admin
to
server.
access.
Admin server is providing the user interface. Using admin server user interface, we can monitor them. Okay. What is backend APIs here? What is the role of the backend APIs? What is the role of the backend
Business
APIs?
logic.
Business logic and each service.
Business logic we can
Business
write.
logic.
These are our REST APIs. These REST APIs will contain our business logic. What is
Logic.
VN client?
Intercommunication
communication
between
between
the
APIs.
Inter-service
one
communication.
API to another.
Yeah, in our service registry, there are two APIs. One API wants to communicate with the another API that we will implement by using inter-service
VN
communication.
client.
What is ribbon?
It is a load balancer.
Maintaining a load balance.
It will decide which request should go to which instance now. Okay. What is
And
the role of
also we
API gateway?
It acts as a mediator between the
User
user request and the backend services.
Based
API
on the
gateway,
request, it will go to the service.
API gateway is the entry point for all the backend APIs in our application. Any common logic that you want to write in your all the APIs, we instead of writing at multiple places, we can keep in the API gateway. What is the purpose of filter in the API gateway?
Authentications, whatever the
Authentications
relevant.
we can implement in the
We
filter.
can
Security
What is
purpose.
routing in the filter? Forwarding the request.
forwarding request.
Okay, good, good. Any questions, anyone?
Sir, here one REST API we are creating two instances, right? But how the real time we are working?
In the real time, I told you yesterday to watch that Kubernetes video.
Okay.
One API will be there. It will be increased based on the traffic. Number of instances will be decided by the Kubernetes cluster.
Okay.
Okay.
Sir, can you please add here browser auth or auth to like in API gateway?
Yeah, today is not the last class, no? Security
Okay.
we have to learn.
Security.
Security topics are not covered yet. Spring security we have to learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So here
only
you
the
see
HTTP request only, sir, not HTTPS.
HTTPS means separate SSL certificates we need to configure, sir, in the domains. So it is HTTP request as of now.
Hello, sir.
Okay. Where we need to register, sir? At which layer we need to register certificate?
That will be configured in the cloud level, sir. Domain level we will configure the certificates.
That is in AWS if we have
Yes,
it.
yes.
Okay,
Hello,
none of
sir.
it is part of this architecture. What you're showing, it will be.
No, it is not part of this architecture. And first of all, developers will not get the chance to configure the SSL certificates. That will be taken care by operations team.
Hello, sir. There are two annotations like enable discovery client and one more is enable Eureka client. So what is the difference between these two annotations, sir? When we use
Eureka client means you need to manually register with the Eureka server. Discover client means automatically it will detect the Eureka server. Eureka client means you need to manually register that application with the Eureka server. Discovery client means it will check for the Eureka in the same machine. If it is running, it will auto register.
Okay, sir.
Yep.
Hello.
Sir,
Yep.
Hi, also, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir. In API gateway, in properties file of the API gateway, LB has been mentioned. Okay, LB. Okay, so means API gateway is doing the load balancing.
Yes, LB means I'm giving the service name. It will go to that service name. It will fetch the URL. Internally, it will use a ribbon to identify which request should go to which server.
Means API gateway also doing the load balancing.
Right. Yes,
activity.
it is also doing the load balancing activity.
And also PN client also
Right. PN client also will do that.
in PN client, okay, there's a there's a component.
I understand your question.
Ribbon component. Okay.
Yes,
Ribbon
I
is also doing.
I understand your question. PN client is doing the load balancing with the help of ribbon. API gateway also will use a ribbon to do the load balancing. In the both places, ribbon will play the role.
Okay, in both places, ribbon is doing.
Right.
Okay.
Sir, if welcome API doesn't have any load balancing, what should I give in the configuration? Directly //
Yeah, you need to give direct URL of that.
Okay.
No need to specify LB, direct URL you will configure.
Okay.
Sir, how to configure Splunk here for monitoring logs? Any idea?
Not Splunk, sir. ELK configurations will be available. ELK configurations will happen in the real time. Splunk is a commercial software.
Okay.
Yep. So that Splunk configuration also, developers not going to do that. That will be done by DevOps people. So this Sunday, I will upload video on how ELK will be configured in the real environment. I already prepared that video. It is in editing mode. You will get it on Sunday. For that, you need to have the knowledge on the Kubernetes part.
Okay. Sir, how it is working? Any idea? Little bit.
Sorry?
How Kubernetes is working? Can you please explain a little bit?
So I can't give you what is Kubernetes in 5 minutes or 1 hour or 10 hours. It is 10 days course. Okay. So even if I give, you can't understand.
Sir, what is the use of Jipkin server?
Jipkin server we did not cover as of now. We will explain that. It is not working here. I need to check why it is not working. Tomorrow we'll focus on the Jipkin server.
Sir,
Hello, sir. Hello.
It is working. I have added.
Sir, this API gateway is exactly same as a AWS API gateway or something different?
Yeah, same. Both will do the same operations. It is Spring Cloud provided API gateway. That is AWS Cloud provided API gateway. Both are used for same purpose.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Sir, filters can perform both pre-processing and post-processing, right?
Yes, we can do that. Here I have implemented a filter as a global filter. Similarly, there is another filter called pre-filter is available. Post-filter is also available.
Where we can perform post-filter?
Here, whenever you open the global filter, you can override those methods here. Not here. There is a separate filter is available. Pre-filter, we need to implement that pre-filter and post-filters. That is separate filter you need to create for that. Multiple filters we can create.
Okay.
Yeah, so
hello.
Yeah, so you explained like the load balancing part, like the round robin, right? But what about the IP hashing and STK session?
That is different, sir. That is different story. We need to customize that ribbon configurations.
Okay.
By default mechanism is round robin. Sticky session, IP hashing, that is different customized configurations we need to do. That configurations will happen in the cloud load balancer level. We need to configure that.
Okay, so this is the cloud balancer. Like we are going to configure with cloud, right?
Right.
This Jipkin server is used to find the performance of the APIs, right?
Correct, sir. Jipkin server is used for a distributed log tracing, which API has taken how much time to process the request and what is the hierarchy of the request processing will be given by Jipkin server.
So pre-interceptor concepts are there now, sir, for us. Why can't we implement that? Because
you can go with the interceptors also, man. You can go with the WebMVC. Interceptor is also available. We can implement interceptor also.
Because filters also we can implement in interceptor, right?
Both we can do that.
So only web applications we can use interceptors, not in distributed.
No. Here also we can implement interceptor. Either you can go for a filter or you can go for interceptor. Anything is fine. Yeah.
Jipkin server monitoring in timing only backend only or API gateway also?
Only backend APIs will be monitored. I mean to say, whoever is registered with the Jipkin server, it will monitor all. If you register API gateway also with the Jipkin, it will monitor API gateway performance also. Okay. If you register your backend APIs request processing time will be monitored by Jipkin server. Jipkin is distributed log tracing server. Okay. To work with the Jipkin server, we need to add Slate dependency in the projects. So that Slate dependency not coming in the IDE. Manually, we need to add that. Tomorrow, I will show you by adding the Slate dependency, how Jipkin server will work.
Hi, Ashok sir. Hello. So if API gateway of Spring Boot and API gateway of cloud, AWS clouds both are same. So if we develop one application using Spring Boot,
suppose if your project is running on the AWS cloud, then you will go for the API gateway to configure. In the cloud, charges will apply. Spring Cloud API gateway is free of cost.
Okay.
Got it?
And means we have to skip one. Okay, either
that one or this one, not both.
We can skip Spring Boot to API gateway or AWS API
Cloud
gateway.
Correct.
Sir, both are equally functional, sir. Any advantages?
Sir, cloud gateway means that is a commercial one. More features will be there in the cloud gateway. The Spring Cloud Gateway is a free open source, right?
So we have more implementations to perform here.
Yes, right.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Sir, why Spring people are providing microservice functionality inside the cloud starter? Means they name as a microservice, no?
We need to ask Spring team why we are doing like that. How I will know that? So they are giving the dependency name as cloud. So why they are giving as cloud, why not microservice means I can't answer that question. That is their choice, no?
Most of the microservices
Sir,
will be
another
used in
question
cloud.
is that how config server get to know about this request?
Did I explain about config server?
No, sir. Sorry. Service registry. I'm asking.
Service registry.
Hello, sir.
Can you come again?
How service? Sir. How service registry get to know that about API gateway?
API gateway is already a client for the service registry. API gateway registered with the service registry. If you see API gateway, is it a client or not? API gateway is a client for the service registry. So as it is a client, it will know that information.
Okay, okay.
Fine, guys. Good. Thank you. So with this, I'm stopping for today. Tomorrow, we'll focus on Jipkin server and what is the purpose of the Jipkin server. Good. I want all of you to please practice all this implementation, guys. We are doing a kind of microservices project. Very, very, very important. If you practice, then only we'll get more clarity. With this, I'm stopping for now. Tomorrow we'll continue. Thank you, guys. Notes already uploaded in the portal for API gateway. Please implement that.